There is a room inside the Palazzo called the Sala dei Giganti, or Room of the Giants, that is decorated with a dramatic scene of which Giorgio Vasari said, "One cannot imagine a painting more horrible and frightening than this one." The room is in the least immediate corner of the square building, on the opposite side from those rooms where dignitary guests would be readily entertained. The interior courtyard of the Palazzo according to the writer Christoph Leopold Frummel, was designed to be unsettling. In a preparatory design for the courtyard, Giulio wanted to give the impression that the building was like some earthquake-shattered ancient monument in danger of collapsing. And when we enter, the room pretends to be tumbling in on us. Those columns, those Doric columns that crushed the giants, are not so dissimilar from those that the visitor has seen in the building's garden facade. The roof seems ripped off overhead. The floor spirals beneath. As Talvacchia writes, we are witnessing the subversive aspect of an architect staging the elimination of his construction. The architect is Giulio Romano, who must have been a rare man to create a work of art, a Gesamtkunstwerk, or concerto, that envisions its own destruction. The subject of the fresco is the fall of the giants. A vivid literary description of this event is contained in Book 1 of Ovid's Metamorphoses. The giants tried to conquer heaven, and these are the lines. Against beleaguered heaven the giants move, hill piled on hills, on mountains mountains lie, to make their mad approaches to the sky, till Jove, no longer patient, took his time, to avenge with thunder their audacious crime, red lightning plaid along the firmament, and their demolished works to pieces rent. So the fate of the giants is a hubris tale, the tale of over-pursued ambition, pinnacle and plunge, cataclysm. But we are meant to note that these cataclysms bring about a new age. The pursuit of a new peak will follow, and ultimately a fresh, new doom. And in keeping with that, it is interesting that, as Frummel tells us, the original commission for what was to become the Palazzo was to transform into a villa the destroyed castle of Marmarolo near Mantua. So when construction began in 1525, this was a Mannerist princely residence built on an old medieval ruin. And we get this concept of renewal following cataclysm even in the Ovid. The blood of the giants mixed with the earth, and men were made. And earth, drenched in her children's weltering blood, gave life to that warm gore, and to preserve memorial of her sons refashioned it in human form. These lines speak to the persistence of worldliness in defying godliness, suggesting even that the earth itself would set us against the heavens. But the mythology in Ovid, that humans were formed from the blood of the giants, is meant to tell us that we should understand that we have inherited those same failings. Erblichen Mängel. That is what Goethe called our inherited failings, that we are enmeshed in, to use the Peter Sohm translation from Faust. We just discussed these lines in the last video. It's funny to think of these failings as being something that we are enmeshed in. Romano has given visual expression to this idea. These giants are meshed into their own failings. They are mortar to the handiwork of their own blasphemy. And to drive home the point that this hubris that the giants have will pass to us and will survive age to age, Romano helps us see this by including these little anachronisms in the fresco to show that the warning is permanently applicable. We have the pillars, which art critic Brian Sewell thought were evocative of the destroyed Philistine temple. Sewell also said that this stream is meant to invoke Noah's flood. We also see a giant here in a Christian-style prayer. And this figure here is dressed in Roman garb. When we observe depictions of the Roman Republic, such as this one of Coriolanus, he is in the same uniform. And when we look up towards the ceiling, we see a Christian-style heaven, though it is populated with pagan deities. The next thing to point out is the vantage point of the viewer being inside of a collapsing cavern. Through one cavern opening, we see giants defending themselves from a precipitous assault from Jupiter coming from the sky, the beam of light serving poetically as his thunderbolt. Through the next cavern opening, we see this flood. The giant closest to us looks like he's trying to pull himself out of this current. Then if we turn right yet again, we see these collapsing columns. And then turning one more time, we see the crushed corpses of the giants as part of the rubble. This wall seems to be the smallest. So regarding our presence in this cavern, I want to use the stasis here because it speaks to the subterranean origin of our impetus to strive against the gods in the first place. Let us read these lines from Book 1 of the Thebaid, where we find Oedipus, already disgraced, already having ripped out his eyes, issuing a curse on his home city of Thebes. He beats his hands on the earth and prays not to heaven above, but to hell below. This is Oedipus's prayer. Gods who hold sway over the guilty souls and over Tartarus crowded with the damned, grant me, thou queen of Tartarus's abyss, grant me to see the evil that my soul desires. He prays to Tisiphone, the fury queen, to plant the impetus, the hubris in his sons' hearts to start this Theban war, which Statius tells us was fought over nothing other than naked power. The origins of our blasphemous striving are subterranean. But now let us turn to the heavenly host in the room of the giants. It is remarkable how startled they are. They look scared. And there are two ways to interpret their fearful looks. The first is that they are trying their best not to fall into the apocalypse themselves. The other way of looking at it is that they were struck in fear by the assault of the giants, and they actually wondered if they could survive it. And here yet again the stasis is helpful. In Book 10 of the Thebaid, a man named Capaneus actually challenges Jupiter to battle. This is what he says: "Come thou, and strive with all thy flames against me, thou, Jupiter." That is the taunt from Capaneus, summoning Jupiter to battle. And as ridiculous as that is, the rest of the Olympian gods are afraid of this. As Statius writes, "Such things the denizens of heaven feel shame to fear, but when they see the heroes stand midway in the dizzy height of air and summon them to insane battle, they marvel in silence and grow pale, doubting the thunderbolt's power." This mortal man, Capaneus, had the ability to scare all of heaven that he might actually defeat Jupiter. What Romano and Statius are saying is that part of the nature of a cataclysmic upheaval is that its eventual doom is not obvious. To those who are caught up in it, the possibility of its success is a source of real fear. And to those who are perpetrating it, as we can see from Capaneus, they have no sense of how ridiculous their purpose is. Which brings us to the humor of the room of the giants. There is humor in bounds in this room. If we look at some of the facial expressions, look at this giant. This giant looks like he's playing peekaboo with a 1-year-old, and this is the face that gets a giggle. You know, some of these other giants are making really ridiculous attempts at self-preservation. You know, it's not my first instinct, in the middle of the apocalypse, at least I hope it's not, to go upside down head first, right into this flood. Or this figure, securing the heavy cave ceiling with one insufficient hand. His gray-bearded face is stoic. It has more gravity than the others, and yet his gesture makes him comical. His fate will be the same as everyone else's, and there's something ridiculous about the stoicism. This is how strongly they believed in their purpose. This figure has the seriousness of a martyr, that even this idiotic idea to wage war on Jupiter had an avuncular presence. It had the credibility of being endorsed by a wise man. And what I get from that, from Romano, is that there is no temperament that's completely immune to the nonsense of an event like this. When God gets pissed off, even the sage will perish. But all that being said, I don't want to get too caught up in the humor, because anyone can see that these are cartoonish-looking giants. And when you read the Vasari, it is incredible to wonder that this room would scare anybody. We must remember, nothing is scary in broad daylight while wearing a fanny pack. But Vasari tells us, when there is a fire in it, makes it appear as if the giants are burning. They used a furnace to generate the effect of burning giants. And if they did that, then that means you weren't supposed to look at this room with full lighting. You were supposed to see it flicker, and then it's a little scarier. You know, imagine academics of the future, 1,000 years from now, walking around a museum about American horror movies, and they see a Chucky doll or a Michael Myers mask, and with total academic arrogance they say, these things used to terrify moviegoers of the 20th century. And a child could look at it and say, but Dad, that's not scary. Well, these were primitive folk back then, son. Like we were a bunch of superstitious fools. It was theater, is what it was. And damn good theater. And as Brian Sewell said, it's utterly, utterly brilliant.